So firstly, thank you to Management Association and KPMG Pakistan for inviting. So what I want to do is over the next 15-20 minutes, talk a bit about blockchain, the concept, blockchain, the technology, and then some of the use cases, right? And then look forward to some of the questions. So blockchain is really, as a concept, trying to address some real fundamental needs that exist in the market today. And if you think about yourselves as consumers, yourselves as employers, yourselves as representatives from different corporations, one of the challenges you have today in the market whenever you're having a transaction is that of trust. Is my transaction actually going to happen? Who I'm transacting with, can I trust my counterparty? What I'm buying or selling, is it a genuine transaction? And historically, we've had lots and lots of makers and checkers. If you look at accountants, transactions happen, and then you need an audit firm to come and audit that transaction. Similarly, organizations have internal audit functions. Similarly, if you get a degree and you want to get it recognized by someone, you have to get it attested. I still remember my Nikah that had a dozen stamps of different people when I was applying for my wife's visa in Dubai. So we have this issue of trust, right? That can we trust a document? Can we trust a counterparty? Can we trust who we deal with? And here lies the problem of human beings trusting each other, organizations trusting each other. And this is what blockchain is actually trying to address. The popular name is blockchain, but really the longer term that they've used is called digital ledger, right? What that really means is, distributed ledger, sorry. What that really means is, if there is a transaction, if there is an exchange of goods and services happening, more people can become aware of it. There could be logic, algorithms, etc. associated with that transaction, and this is where some words around smart contracts, etc. you may have heard. So really what blockchain is trying to address is the issue of trust. It's the digitization of trust. How do you get that comfort? How do you get that assurance that something is authentic, something is genuine, and something is correct, really? And with blockchain, the technology that they have developed, and there are different types of blockchain platforms, really what this technology does is it distributes the details of those transactions to different parties, okay? And that distribution itself is very, very secure. It's really immutable, so if you want to change it, corrupt it, it's very, very difficult. In fact, it's a 0.00001% probability of this thing actually going wrong. So it's very, very secure. And one of the arguments against blockchain is, well, how is that different from a centralized data source, right? Well, in a centralized data source, you have a single point of failure. If that central data source falls or fails for whatever reason, then the truth could be lost. And I personally feel that the concept that blockchain is trying to address is valid, is very much needed, but the technology is actually going to evolve. And if you recall, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the internet first came, there was a lot of excitement. Everybody was trying to actually get a website up and running. In fact, people were trying to find any reason or any excuse to get a website up and running because it was the in thing to do. I think blockchain is actually going through that phase right now. The concept makes sense, but I don't think we need to try and force the adoption of blockchain on every possible use case. I think there are very valid use cases for blockchain, but I don't think the hype that is going around blockchain saying this is the next big thing, it is probably going to become in due course, but today a lot of the use cases are perhaps a bit far-fetched. If you look around in different parts of the world, and I'll take you through some examples, there are some real valuable use cases. If you look at Dubai, the government of Dubai has said that they want to have all their government services on blockchain in the next few years. I think that will be possible, but not every government service can actually come on blockchain. right? For example, healthcare, right? Healthcare is not something you can force on blockchain, but certainly land registry records, right? Today, if you go buy a property, and for those of you who can afford in defense, there are thick files, right? These files have stamps and papers and documents, etc. And in Saudi Arabia and in Dubai, they want to put all of these on blockchain. And what they mean by that is to say that, look, there is a piece of land. Every time the ownership changes, we will make this record in the distributed ledger. That means different nodes, different servers, different computers, etc. will be aware that this piece of land has transferred ownership to somebody else. Now, if somebody wants to corrupt that, they're not able to do that because that transaction has now been recorded in a manner that everyone is aware. So if anybody tries to corrupt it in one single source, others can actually refute that. And that's the terminology behind distributed ledger. Everybody knows about the transaction, so it becomes very secure and authentic. And if somebody wants to corrupt it, they actually have to make that corruption in every single node, which is nearly impossible, and hence the 0.001%. So land registry is a very relevant use case. Saudi Arabia, in UAE, both these governments are already doing that. Similarly, if you think about instances where you have maker-checker, and this is where I want to use the audit example, right? We have firms who do transactions and then we come in and do auditing of them. But imagine if those transactions all started to come onto blockchain, all started to come in a distributed ledger format in which everybody knew about those transactions in the organization with the different technology, etc. Then what is the auditor really going to be auditing, right? Because there is no risk of fraud or manipulation of those transactions. One project that we recently did in UAE that I had the pleasure of leading was around eKYC. Now, every time one of you goes to a bank to open a bank account, they ask you for a set of documents. Then you go to another bank, or you go to an insurance company or a brokerage, etc. They'll again ask you for the same documents. This creates inconvenience. This creates duplication of effort that has already happened, and it creates a cost, right? That, there's a cost of capturing this data, there's a cost of providing this data over and over again, and there's a cost of storing this data. So what we did was we worked with 3 banks and 3 exchange houses to say that, is it possible for one bank to rely on the KYC done by another bank using the blockchain technology? So we actually developed a prototype where we developed a proof of concept solution where we showed that if a bank captures the KYC of a customer, then another bank could use it because of the blockchain features I mentioned earlier. It's secure, it's authentic, it's immutable, etc. But is this going to go live anytime soon? Probably not. Why is it? Because the regulations that we need to accompany that are not there. Historically, every bank is asked to do their own KYC, but there is no regulation that allows for us to rely on KYC done by other third parties or other institutions. So I think with blockchain, there is potential, there is a lot of valid use cases, but I think there's a lot of hype. But what about going forward? What is the future going to be for blockchain? I think the power of blockchain will come when different technologies are going to converge, and we're already starting to see that. So for example, if you have Internet of Things, when devices or things can actually capture data and share that data, and imagine if that data is captured on the blockchain platform, how powerful that becomes. In India, for example, we're working with HP, the ink manufacturer, who are really worried that there are a lot of fake products in the market, right? And as a proof of concept, we were thinking that if these inks, when they're manufactured right at the actual original factory, and you can trace them right through from the time they leave the factory to the time they get to the shop, and you have that captured on the blockchain today, you're buying an authentic product. But imagine if that product itself could transmit the data rather than a human being having to capture it, then that becomes even more powerful. Similarly, you think about large organizations that have a lot of intercompany transactions. You have to use physical currency or bank transfers or debits and credits, and here is where cryptocurrencies now start to play a part. Now, we've all heard about Bitcoins and Ethereums and other cryptocurrencies, but what about tokenized cryptocurrencies? And here what I mean by tokenized is these cryptocurrencies are backed rupee for rupee or dollar for dollar or dirham for dirham. So you have a physical currency, and along with that you have the cryptocurrency. And imagine if all those transactions happen using the cryptocurrency, but as a customer you're comfortable that yes, there is a physical cash behind it. So you just net the transaction rather than having to, do intercompany physical money transfers, etc. So I think what I'm sharing with you are some of the use cases that we're actually seeing. I think there will be a lot more use cases coming forward in the future, but in terms of the hype there is today, I think there is still a lot more hype than reality. I think in a place like Pakistan, I see a lot of potential for blockchain. I'll give you a recent example. I think all of us were following the elections. Even in this day and age, the elections happen, there's a physical paper, in some ink put on your fingers, and somebody at the end of the day is counting those papers, somebody is disputing that, somebody is challenging that. But in the blockchain world, all of that actually disappears. You leverage the distributed ledger technology, you do your vote, it's captured on the ledgers, you know it's authentic because it's cross-referenced with a unique ID, etc. And at the end of the day, the moment the polling closes, the results are out. There's no need to dispute, count, recount, etc. And I think, I can go on and on in terms of the list of potential use cases, but really the concept very much makes sense. The technology has some way to go because one of the limitations of blockchain is the amount of data that you can store on a single transaction. It's actually just a few kilobytes. You cannot even store images or large amounts of data on blockchain nodes. It's actually a few kilobytes. So as we saw the first computer DICIAC that at the start, with 512 kilobytes, this is where blockchain is today. Very, very infant, but the potential is huge. And certainly I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a lot more evolution and a lot more use cases coming. And I think certainly it goes to the heart of addressing the issue I started the discussion with, is around trust. Blockchain is there to digitize trust. And I think with the right technology and the right progress, we're all going to start to benefit from it in due course. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to the questions.
Be sure and subscribe to the New Spaces YouTube channel. And don't forget to ring the bell.